Hey guys, welcome back to my next installment on my great-great-grandfather's memoir of the American Civil War. I'm almost done with a bowl of Golden Extra, soon to be followed by Star of the East, mentioned in my last video. Still smoking my estate, kind of an older 606 pot. Bookmark. I think we were on chapter XI, which would make this 11. I don't know my Roman numerals well, but I believe that's where we're at. Just before the close of the war in 65, we were ordered to Fort Spanish and Fort Blakely for outside picket work. We were shipped on Mississippi boats, which only drew from 3 to 4 feet of water. We got along all right until we reached Fort Morgan, where we stopped a while and looked over the old dilapidated fort which had been knocked to pieces by our gunboat. That's just about out. Then we proceeded on our journey until we were within 20 miles of our destination, when an awful storm came up, and the cabins on the boat began to shake. As they were old boats, and the captain had orders to run her ashore, as the seas were getting so high, the water was running over the boat, and it was beginning to sink. Before the boat sunk, we had orders to throw our horses overboard. That was an awful hard thing to do, as our horses had brought us through so much. Our horses were saddled, and we had 3 or 4 men hold them, one on each side, with one pulling at the bridle. Then one would give them a shove, and the horse would drop into the sea. It was a sheer drop of 8 feet, and the horse, going under water, would finally come up, see land, and strike out for shore. Of all the horses thrown into the sea, only 2 were lost. These came up facing the boat, circled around, put out to sea, and were not seen again. The result of swallowing so much salt water had a very bad effect on the horses. It was a long time before they were well enough to be used. After the horses were thrown overboard, it was up to the boys to save themselves, as the boat was fast sinking, and the water was up to the deck on which was situated the boilers. The boat was about 80 rods from the shore, but none of the men were lost. The boys had sidearms and sabers, and the salt water stained them. It was impossible to get them clean again. We then followed the shoreline on to Fort Spanish, where we were ordered in the first place to do outside picket work. We got there and saw signs up warning us of the torpedoes, which were buried all over the surrounding grounds. We saw a team drawn by 4 mules together with drivers who had been blown into a terrible mess by one of these mines, which in itself was sufficient warning. On our arrival, they took a detail of rebel soldiers who located the balance of the mines and had them disposed of. The bay was also filled with torpedoes. It's interesting they're calling them torpedoes, but anyway, the day we got there, the fort surrendered, and 700 of the finest looking men that I ever saw during the war marched past us as we stood mounted outside the fort. Of course, they had seen nothing of the hardship of a campaign that we had. We cheered them, and there were a good many of them laughing as they went by. Some of the boys were from Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Got a got a pass to go and visit some of the boys of the 20th Wisconsin who were camped there during the siege. We were within a few rods of where they camped when we saw quite a few running towards us. We asked them what was the matter, and they said they were fired on from the sand batteries that they had in Mobile Bay. We went over there, and just as we got there, a 10-pound cannon shot took a row of puppet tents and tore up the whole row and dug a ditch all the way along. We did not stop any longer as the batteries were still pounding away. After everything was settled, we had orders to go through Alabama, which was a very beautiful country. We crossed the Alabama and Pearl River, which is also very beautiful. The water was so clear you could sit on your horse and count the nail points on the horse's hoof. Then we went on until we came to Tombigbee River, which is another beautiful river with very soft water. Almost everything that lies along the shores or across the stream is petrified, even the trees. The boys chopped off stone and made razor hones of it. Okay, I guess to hone the razor. While there, we did our washing, as it was customary to do washing whenever we struck a good place. We also went in bathing, and as there was a nice clear spot with shade trees, with space to pitch our pup tents, and room to tie our horses, which we did by stringing a lariat from one tree to another and then hitching all the horses to it. We had decided to camp there all night. We heard a rumpus up the stream and went up to investigate. There we found another regiment hauling a safe which had been anchored in the center of the river with a chain leading to the shore, which was the means of their discovering it. They opened the safe and found that it contained large quantities of silver, jewels, plate, and many other precious articles. Some treasure in this book. I don't remember reading that the first time. The quarrel over the find grew into a fight, which became so noisy and bitter that it called the attention of the officers, who immediately took possession of all the spoil. About 12 o'clock at night, my partner and I were getting our sleep. We generally used our saddles for pillows, and as a rule, we had a sack of corn underneath our horses' breakfast, for our horses' breakfast. It was a very dark when I was awakened by a crunching sound outside, and my partner said to me, "Bill, what is that?" And I said, "Keep still." And in a little while, we heard a sort of grunt outside, and with another, "Keep still." I unleashed my saber, and just as I did so, a large mother pig, followed by several little shapes, passed in front of our tent. I was on my knees peering out of the opening, and just as she passed directly in front of me, I gave a heavy lunge and drove my saber into her. With a startling squeal, she dashed away, almost carrying me with her, over sleeping men and into the horses, almost causing a stampede. You can imagine the excitement this pig caused. It awakened everyone in camp, and half an hour afterwards, the cook came by my tent and reported they had a dead pig and asked what to do with him. I instructed him to cook it for breakfast, as I was a commissary sergeant. So we all had a big chunk of pig, which was our hardtack. With our hardtack went pretty good. Every man left in the morning with a piece of pork in his saddlebag, as the pig weighed something over 200 pounds. We continued on our way, stopping for a while at Montgomery to visit the home of Jeff Davis, and had all the horses we captured branded US 4 WC, 4th Wisconsin Cavalry. Then we started for Vicksburg, Mississippi. On our way, our wagon got filled up with young colored children and old colored women who had run away from their homes thinking they were going to get freedom. This became a nuisance, as many of the children were poorly clad and some not clad at all. When about 30 miles from Jackson, Mississippi, I, being a non-commissioned officer at that time, was detailed with 3 men to take these colored people to Jackson and turn them over to the authority there. There were about 150 in all, and when we arrived there in the evening, it was quite dark, and we had some trouble in getting a satisfactory answer from the officials, as they had no place to put these people. They opened up the Capitol Ward, the building being burned earlier in the war, and said we could turn them in there for the night. That was the last I saw of these poor people, who were left to the mercy of our government or the authorities in charge there. And whatever has become of these poor colored people, I hope they came out all right. On the way from Jackson to Vicksburg, we heard that the war was over. We had that proven to us before we got a very long way on our journey, as we met rebel soldiers at almost every drinking place, eating and taking a rest on their way home. We had many chats with them, and everybody seemed to be glad that the war was over. We were mighty glad when we reached Vicksburg and received official news that the war was over and that we had fulfilled our contract, as we had enlisted for 3 years or during the war. We were sure the war was over when we saw the rebels going to their homes, so we were figuring on seeing our dear friends and our mothers whom we had left behind. But when we got to Vicksburg the next morning, we were very much disappointed. Belle, stop. My dog's scratching. Sit. But when we got to Vicksburg the next morning, we were very much disappointed. We received an order for all cavalry regiments, of which there were 3 in Vicksburg, to get ready for a trip to Mexico. What a twist. To go with Sheridan to drive Maximilian out. We surely were disappointed, as we thought we had finished our contract with the government, the war being over. But we obeyed orders, got ready the next morning, and shipped on boats down the Mississippi River to the Red River, and then up the Red River to Shreveport, Louisiana. From there we marched to the Rio Grande River. I don't know my geography too well, but that seems like a long march. I lost my place. Rio Grande River, which was 1,200 miles. Okay, I was right. Should have kept reading. Which was 1,200 miles, and we got landed at a place called Ringgold Barracks about 150 miles from Brownsville, Texas. We went in camp at Brownsville, Texas, which was right opposite Matamoros, Mexico. The river Rio Grande divided the two places. Maximilian was given 10 days to get out of Mexico, and what happened to him is history. After being in service about 6 months after the war was over, I was discharged at Brownsville, Texas, and then went into Brazos, Texas, and from there we took the Gulf boats to New Orleans and were discharged. We bought our first citizens' suits in the city of New Orleans and became civilians. And that's the end of that chapter. That is not the end of the story, but I think that's where I'll end it for today. He does go into a little bit of elaboration on his 6 months in kind of Texas and Mexico. So there's some interesting stories there as well. I look forward to getting into them next time. Thanks for listening, guys, and appreciate you all. Talk to you again soon.